Thanks very much, Steve. Well, as Direct Energy, we're very pleased to be here in a position to play a role as a sponsor here today. We've had a very strong relationship with the region of Peel for a number of years, and we've been pleased to participate not in just this Energy Summit, but in previous ones. And I'm very much looking forward to next year for the 10th anniversary, and we hope we'll get invited back to participate in that as well. So a quick background on Direct Energy and why I'm remotely qualified to talk about this today. We're part of an international energy group headed by Centrica PLC in the UK. We're part of the downstream business, so along with British Gas, our sister company in the UK, we form part of that, and there's also an upstream business which is run out of Centrica Energy. To give you a sense of the scale, there are about 40,000 employees in the Centrica group of companies, and we've got about 31 million customers around the globe, so a decent-sized organization. Direct Energy itself, and I appreciate you probably can't see most of the data on the screen here, but what do? We provide energy and energy-related services to residential and business customers. It's as simple as that. In terms of a footprint, the green on the map represents our services business. This is the installation and maintenance of pieces of kit, whether it's a boiler, a heater, or a cooler. And that's across a large footprint of North America. The dark blue and orange really represent the commodity areas where we sell energy, natural gas, or electricity to customers. And we've got about 6 million customer relationships across North America. Here in Canada, we've got significant businesses in Ontario for residential and business energy, as well as out west in Alberta and British Columbia. So enough about Direct Energy. Why are we here talking about this today? Well, we think energy is a hot topic right now. We know that people, our customers, whether they be business or residential, are talking about energy. And the questions up on the board are really the sorts of things we're hearing. Some regulators lead us to believe that people don't really care about energy. All they're worried about is keeping the lights on. Well, clearly that's an important part of this. We need to make sure the lights are on, but we think that's the beginning of the story, not the end of it. We know that residential and business customers really want choice. They want control when it comes to energy. They have that in a number of other aspects of their life, and we don't see any reason why that shouldn't be the case in energy as well. If you think about something as simple as the phone, you have choice. You can have a home phone, you can have a cell phone, you can buy a fancy one, you can buy an Apple iPhone, you can buy a cheap one, you can buy a plan that gives you all sorts of different data, all sorts of different minutes, music, whatever it is you want to have with that phone. Some people might say that that's really a commodity, just having a phone line. Well, think what's happened to that industry. We think energy should be no different to that. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about North America now, and what the landscape looks like right now, how we can use the UK as a proxy for what might happen in the future. So as you'd expect with a series of federal, provincial, state, some cases municipal legislation, it's a bit of a patchwork in North America. There's not very much consistency, and it's been hard to see competition develop. Texas and Georgia are two states in the US where competition has flourished, and that's been the case for a number of years. Other markets have really stalled in their attempts at deregulation and promoting competition. Sad to say that Ontario is an area where competition has really gone backwards. We've seen some changes in regulations which actually have impacted the market. Consumers here have less choice than they did a few years ago. And I think that's bad for consumers, it's bad for regulators and legislators, and it's bad for companies like ours who have dollars to invest. Keeping competition alive is good for a number of different parties, and I'll talk about that a bit later. As I'll discuss a bit later on as well, the complexities of the North American market mean there's no silver bullet here. This is not my attempt to say the UK is the model we should use. there's no silver bullet, no easy solution, but there are lots of examples we can take from what's happened in the UK and other competitive markets and think about how we might use those in North America to promote competition and really get the benefit of that as well. So, for the purists amongst you, I'm going to apologize for condensing 15 years of deregulation in the UK into a very short slide in 4 buckets. So, this is really how the market changed over the course of 15 years. So in the first period, 1986 to 1998, this was the period of the Thatcher government, for those of you who remember that and may have heard a lot more about it with Margaret Thatcher's death a few weeks ago. This is a period when powerful public policy dictated that in the UK, it was time to break up the state-owned monopolies. That was the case in energy, also BP. You can look at a number of other entities that happened to. This is where the government said we're going to not only break those up, we're going to privatize and we're going to liberalize. We're going to create the foundation of competition. There was a firm policy that was created and implemented, and it took a lot of political will to get there. If you move into the next phase, 1999 to 2004, this is really when the competitive market began to find its feet. Lots and lots of people switched energy providers. The incumbent monopolies, including British Gas, our sister company, lost market share. They went from 90% market share, with other competitors slowly chipping away at that. This is where we saw new entrants come in. And one of the delegates today reminded me about a new entrant who came in, built a huge market share, got a fantastic business model, and then found that it couldn't bill customers, couldn't serve them, and they quickly left the market. So this is a period of great flux where lots of people came in, lots of consolidation happened, but also a period when competitors came in and decided they had to invest. They had to invest in a brand, they had to invest in systems to really make competition work. As we moved into 2005, the market really settled down. Retailers understood that actually, if everybody just switches the whole time, you're all going to go out of business because it's expensive to bring customers on. So it settled down. People started to differentiate on something other than just price or a short-term incentive to switch. We saw non-standard offers developed, and we saw that customer service got much more attention. It wasn't all good attention, but people really focused on what is it the customer actually wants and how do we provide that to them. Something that was really significant for the UK was that the government took a very macro approach to carbon reduction. They signed up to a number of European directives which essentially ensured that as a whole, that the market reduced the carbon emissions. Essentially, the costs of that were passed down to retailers and therefore down to customers as well. And that was a big change in the market for a number of people. The fourth period is the most recent one, is really the new Conservative government came in around 2010. We went through the economic downturn. And we saw a renewed focus on efficiency in the market. We saw questions about, really, does competition actually work? Are all sectors of the society, including the poorest members of society, really served best by a competitive market? We had energy market probes and reviews where very difficult questions were being asked. We also had questions around whether or not, on a wholesale perspective, so the generators, were really the right signals there for generation to be built in the future. And those are exactly the questions that are being asked in North America right now, in Ontario, Texas, in the Northeast US. Those are exactly the same sorts of questions. And we saw the government really trying to stimulate efficiency through something called the Green Deal in the UK. It's not dissimilar to the Green Energy Act that we've seen in Ontario here. So that's sort of the pattern of activity that happened in deregulation. As I said, I've condensed that into a very short period of time, but over 15 years, this market has really developed significantly. If I think about really what that looks like from the UK today, I would say that after 15 years, deregulation really works. Has it been perfect? Absolutely not. But the so-called experiment of deregulation hasn't been as horrific as everybody said it would be. The UK does have a functioning market. People respond to price signals, but that's retail customers as well as the wholesale market. And the reason that's obvious to me is that there are 5 million people every year change their energy supplier in the UK. To me, that's a sign of a healthy market where people have choice and they can decide what's important to them and switch to the supplier that provides that. Although I don't think competition is all about the cheapest price, we have seen prices come down. In 2012, gas prices in the UK were the lowest in Europe, even though the UK imports most of their gas now. Electricity prices were the 5th lowest in Europe, and that's really when you compare the UK against a number of economies that haven't deregulated at all. So you're comparing them against state monopolies. So from a price perspective, very competitive. In terms of product differentiation, I was looking on one of the switching websites in the UK yesterday. I saw an online product, fixed products, capped products, products linked heavily to energy efficiency and incentives, lots of free dashboards available to monitor energy usage and control. I saw rates related to green and carbon neutral. I saw rates linked to loyalty points like air miles, etc. So terrific differentiation of product types, which really says that customers aren't necessarily choosing energy based on price. They're choosing on what works for them. In the UK, there's a very interesting model on smart meter rollout. Whereas in North America, we've embraced the idea that utilities should roll that out. In the UK, it's the retailers. The competitive market is responsible for rolling out smart meters. Good or bad, it will be interesting to see how that develops. But there is significant acceleration of the rollout, with the figures I've put up. 65% planned to be rolled out by 2015. It's 65% of the market. I've put some figures here that energy efficiency has really taken off in the UK, 4% growth each year since 2007. And that's heavily linked to the use of energy at home. The two are not separate as they tend to be in North America right now. They've managed to combine them, and people are thinking more holistically about that. Has it all been roses? Absolutely not. That 15 years has been struggles backwards and forwards. It's been difficult to create conditions that really work through all the economic cycles, through all the wholesale energy cycles. In other words, is it great when the prices are high? Is it great when prices are low? So it's had to be managed as it's gone along. But after 15 years, I think it's fair to say that the market is working in the UK, and there are things that we can take away from that. So what are the key messages I would say that you get from the UK market after 15 years? Well, competition isn't necessarily a dirty word. After 15 years, it can and does work. One of the things that we probably don't spend enough time thinking about in North America is that when you look at competitiveness, when you look at differentiation of products, when you think about new products and new propositions, those are really best achieved in a competitive market. The reason that people will spend the time, the research and development dollars, is because they think they can make a return on it. Without that incentive, it's hard to drive that. Wholesale markets in the UK are also opened up, and prices have responded, competitors and participants in those markets have responded to price signals. There are still questions out there about whether or not people are building generation assets, but the market works. Regulators have a really important role to play in a competitive market. It isn't the same role that they play right now in a fully regulated market. It's very much about monitoring and enforcement. It certainly is not put it out there and let it run and we'll worry about it if anyone cries foul. This is an active management, an active investigation to make sure that there isn't abuse going on. The other thing I would say is we shouldn't ever forget that the UK market liberalisation and the competitive situation was driven by significant government policy. It was a significant majority in the UK Parliament that allowed Margaret Thatcher and her government to really push through some pretty difficult decisions at that time. And that was really the thing that created the impetus for the business. So that isn't easy to achieve, and it isn't the situation in many places in North America. So we have to think about how to deal with that. And lastly, I would say that it's important to remember that clarity really does drive some important decisions around the market structure, around investment. Speaking as a potential investor in energy markets, we need the certainty that markets are going to be there. We need the certainty that the competitive situation is going to prevail. In the UK, I think after the first few years of competition, it was easy to see that both regulators and politicians were committed to the competitive market. We need that certainty in North America to make sure that investors like us can actually afford to put the investments in and be sure that the returns are going to come in the long term. Finally, I suppose the biggest takeaway I have is this takes time. I think we're all of us looking at competitive markets and wishing that they were more open, think this can be achieved overnight. It absolutely cannot. 15 years is what it's taken to get where we are today in the UK. And thinking that you can somehow accelerate through those 4 periods that I talked about is a bit of a dream. You have to go through some of the pain of opening the market up, seeing the activity and it beginning to settle down. So if we think about the UK market, think about some of the lessons from that. Let's come back to North America and think about, well, what does that mean for us? How could we think about that? At Direct Energy, we think that competitive markets can be the long-term solution for retail energy. One of the things we don't really think about enough is that regulated monopolies shift risk to ratepayers. Whether that's through the tariff, whether it's through the tax base, ratepayers basically are paying for the inefficiencies of regulated monopolies. In competitive markets, those inefficiencies are penalized, either by the returns that people get or at the shareholder level. We think that there's efficiencies that can be created, and efficiencies doesn't mean job losses. Efficiencies mean a much more efficient and cost-effective proposition. Significant employment happened in the UK as a consequence of restructuring the market because new opportunities, new products, new propositions were created. I've touched a little bit on innovation, but innovation is the means by which people differentiate their products in a competitive market. We are talking about the ultimate commodity, it's energy. If everybody just sold energy, all you're going to talk about is price. We think that by differentiating the service you provide, the type of products you provide, listening to what customers have to say, you can really differentiate and create a very interesting proposition. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I don't want to ignore price because price is important. Prices should be as low as practicable. And that's low as practicable is important. I can't guarantee that competitive markets will give you the lowest prices because there are commodity curves, there are macroeconomic factors that affect the energy market. But in an efficient market where people will face competition if they can't provide effective cost management, prices should be at a decent level, as we've seen in the UK right now. A key part of competitive markets is the relationship between retailers and customers. The UK market only works because retailers are able to access customers and interact with them on a regular basis. In North America, in many markets, the relationship is between the customer, you, and your utility. You receive a bill, a branded bill from your utility. You pick up the phone and call them when there's an issue. We would like to change that. We feel strongly that the role of a utility is to focus on its core strengths, which is transmission and distribution, ensuring the reliability of the gas and the power networks. That's where a utility can be most effective. We don't think that billing, that customer care, that providing energy to customers is what utilities should do. That should be left to the competitive market. We think that retailers should be responsible for managing the relationship with customers. They should have to invest to provide the right sort of billing infrastructure, the right experience for customers to differentiate them from their competitors. That's a big change potentially to the industry. We recognize that that sort of change is absolutely not going to happen without the coordinated support of various participants. That means utilities, governments, legislators all have to be on board. We can't push this through. Customers can't push this through. It needs everyone to support it and make sure that transition can happen. It's also worth pointing out that people like us, retailers, require huge levels of investment if you're going to do this. It's a long-term game. And as we saw in the UK in the early years, people who are in it to make a quick buck will fail. This is a long-term investment and a long-term play, but the returns in the long term should be reasonable. Finally, and I think what's important and different about things right now is that we're entering a smart world. Smart technology through the rollout of interval meters offers us a tremendously different opportunity than we've had before. The whole industry is changing, as we've heard from a number of workshops today and over the last day and a bit. And here's an opportunity to grasp that through the lens of competition. If all we do is just embrace those technologies for the sake of the technologies, I think we've missed an opportunity. We think that this change, both on the residential and the business side, will offer the opportunity for competition to flourish. Think about demand-side management. Think about distributed generation. Think about other energy efficiency. Those can all be part of a competitive market. We don't see that as energy efficiency. We see that as part of a bundled offering where customers think about the energy they use when they plug something into the socket at the same time as they think about the efficiency of their buildings, how they use energy, how their businesses run, how their homes run. To us, it's all about choice and it's all about control. The choice to decide what's important to you as a customer. Is it price? Is it features? Is it functionality? Is it security? Is it risk? And the control to think about those things that you really want to be in control of. Some customers want to sign up and leave it. Others want to be actively involved and monitor it. So if we think about the UK market, and I contrast that with North America and where North America's got to, you might feel that I'm painting a sort of a bad picture, a rough picture. But it's not all bad. We have seen some progress in North America. I touched earlier on Texas and Georgia. Those are markets that have been open for a while. Their competition has been flourishing. We see other markets where regulators and legislators have made significant progress. Pennsylvania in the US, Connecticut, and Ohio. Regulators have basically said, we want to move towards competition. We know it's difficult, but we think it's the right way to go. We think the market's more effective, and that's where we want to go. Smart meter deployment in North America has been pretty significant. 25% of the market is rolled out already, although the pace is beginning to slow right now, which is a bit of a worry for us. But even without large-scale opening up of markets or large-scale smart meter deployment, we have seen innovation. There are some really interesting products out there. So, for example, in Texas right now, there is a portion of society who struggle each month to pay their bills. We've developed a product called a prepaid product, where basically customers have a credit card. They can charge that up at a 7-Eleven, and they can decide how much energy they want to use in a particular day. They don't get a bill after the fact that says, oh, by the way, you owe us X amount of money. They control. They know how much they're going to use that day, and they can go day to day, week to week, using their paychecks as they see fit. There are other products out there which I think are more akin to the mobile or the cell phone industry. Free power weekends or free power days, that exists in a number of areas in North America. The idea that you as a customer can choose one day of the week where you don't pay for your energy. Now, if you're clever, you do all your washing, you do all your baking, you do everything you can on that day. What a great example of how customers can shift their load with something very simple. Doesn't involve technology, doesn't involve anything else, just organization. We've been successful, and as have other retailers, in rolling this out in different jurisdictions. That's the sort of innovation that really can come from a competitive market and a desire on our part to differentiate our product. What I find most interesting about that product is it's not the cheapest out there. You can buy a standard energy contract for cheaper than that, but customers have said, you know what, I've worked out that I can shift enough of my load to save myself money, so I'm going to do that, and I'm prepared to pay more for that. So it isn't necessarily all about price. The other point I think it's worth remembering is that prices right now are at an all-time low. I wouldn't say that's anything to do with competitive or not competitive market. It's the nature of the cycle right now, and certainly the nature of some of the gas finds in North America right now. You might think that the low prices mean, well, let's not worry about it. That's, who cares about competition? Everything's cheap. Well, I'd go back to the fact that this is the long play. This is a 15-year process if we go by the UK market standards. If you don't make a decision now, you're not going to start that 15-year process. You're not going to start the cycle. So I'd say this is exactly the right time that we should be thinking about competitive markets and what they can do for us in the future. So I'm going to end my talk today with a short video. This is a vision for what we at Direct Energy think competitive markets can create for customers. It was actually developed in the UK by our sister company, British Gas, but I think a number of aspects of this are absolutely applicable to North America. It's worth pointing out as you watch this that this is not a Jetsons-style video. This is not the home of the future, 20, 50, 100 years away. A lot of the technology being shown in the video today is available and being either utilized or being tested right now. Some of it in the UK by our sister company, and some we're trialing in different parts of North America right now. So this vision is probably 18 to 24 months away from being a reality. We think this is the power of competitive markets. This is what it's really all about. And so as you watch this, think about choice, think about control. This is really what it's all about. So, I've deliberately left time at the end because I figured there might be one or two questions or comments on this. So please feel free to come up to the microphone, put your hand up. I will say that there are a number of direct energy people in the room, so I'm going to refuse to take questions from any of them.
Great presentation, Nick. Question for you, during the early stages of the deregulation, what were rates doing for electricity, particularly in the UK, and what was the consumers' feedback on that? Because certainly here in Ontario, we've seen rates be a real lightning rod for the whole issue.
It's a good question. I think if you look through that 15-year period I've been talking about, we've had significant changes in wholesale prices. For example, even now, while wholesale gas prices are very low in North America, they're actually increasing dramatically in the UK right now. And so I'll give you a sense of what it's like to work for British Gas in the UK. So if you are on a variable rate as a British Gas customer, if British Gas puts its rate up, that is the #1 item on the news on British TV that evening. The #1 item. It is front page of the newspaper. And so when you have 50% market share and 12 million customers, there's significant exposure. It becomes a very political issue, becomes consumer groups, low-income groups, the elderly. They all become very focused on that issue, and the difference between the wholesale price, the retail price, how much profit you're making, has become very, very, very difficult topic. And even now, Centrica, in its annual results process, has a lot of scrutiny about how much money it's made and whether that's right. People still think of energy, and it's exactly the same in North America, as a right. And should it be something that people actually make money on, or should it be a state entity? So it's a good question. I mean, we have to keep track of that, and we have to ensure that that people are getting energy at sensible prices, that profit margins are sensible. But I think that the competitive market is the way to do that. As long as you have the right number of suppliers who are competing on price and features, it should correct itself, and the regulator should be there to police that, as they do in the UK very strongly, and put fines out there if people don't do the right thing, and manage it accordingly.
Nick, your whole presentation seemed to be premised on competitive markets being the goal, being the end game here. And well, from your perspective, that may have been the purpose or the end game over the last 15 years. I would submit that's not the game, not the goal, not the public policy objective over the next 15 years. In the next 15 years, we need to creatively destroy the fossil fuel industry. Oil, gas, and coal. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 80%. And I'm not saying by 2050, I'm saying by 2030. So that, to me, is the end game. If competitive markets can help us destroy the fossil fuel industry, creatively destroy the fossil fuel industry, then I'll buy in. But having competitive markets as the goal rather than a possible means, I have a great deal of trouble with. I'd like you to address how your goal of competitive markets are going to help us achieve keeping 80% of the fossil fuels that have been discovered to date in the ground.
Thank you. It's a great question. So I do agree that the creation of a competitive market cannot be the end game here. It has to be part of the process. And I think energy efficiency, a change in the generation mix, a change in the nature of generation. So distributed generation, home solar, wind can and should be facilitated by the competitive market. I think public policy has an important role to play. I think there's tremendous work that both legislators and regulators and public interest groups can play in fostering some of the activity in the same way, you know, that they've contributed in other places to the development of a competitive market. But I think our view is that the competitive market is the best way to facilitate that. It drives competition. It drives people to think differently about the sorts of products that they can provide. I'll give you an example. We have an opportunity in North America for people to combine a solar and regular energy product. Does that mean that, you know, that's going to change overnight the landscape? No, but people want to think about that being different than the normal product that they buy from somebody else. We see that on an industrial scale as well. We see incentives being provided by government, but they are on a standalone basis related to a particular energy efficiency or a particular generation mix. We think that by creating a market where people can combine energy and some of those features, you're going to accelerate the pace of change. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, and you know, if all we did is satisfy this and create a competitive market, is that going to achieve all your goals? Probably not. But we feel that it's going to be a more efficient and a quicker way to do that. You know, I recognize that not everybody shares your view around the elimination of fossil fuels or whether that should be a priority, but I think this is a vehicle that will make it happen quicker than relying on public policy alone or relying on legislators to make change or force, using a carrot or a stick, that change to happen.
I have one other question, Nick. In our markets right now, as everybody knows, our conservation incentives are delivered by the LDCs, which personally I've always thought is a little bit odd that the people who sell the commodity are the ones that we ask to convince us to buy less of it. In your model with a retailer who sells the commodity and a utility who's just in charge of delivering it, assuming we had incentives that continued for conservation, how would you see those being handed out, and whose job would that be?
It's a good observation. In fact, I think the same peculiar system would happen in a competitive market, but it would actually be the retailers who would be responsible for trying to get their customers to use less. And that may sound completely backward, but we see great advantage in building a long-term relationship with customers. That doesn't have to be a month-to-month bill. It can be a series of other products and opportunities with that customer. That's much more exciting to us than just signing a customer up and hoping they stay with us. So if you can provide energy efficiency tips, if you can provide them with an opportunity to understand what incentives might be available, if you can actually deliver some of them through insulation or through changing to high efficiency equipment, that to me is really what differentiation is all about. Innovation is not just making a boring energy contract slightly more interesting. It's about adding other things that a customer might be interested in. So the incentive is there. Clearly the retailers are not going to be responsible for generating the cash that's paid out from that incentives. It can be managed by, you know, a government entity or however, but I think there's a role for retailers to play in really allowing customers to maximize the benefit of some of those incentives.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess in a competitive market, if you do a really great job at that compared to your competitor, it means you might sell less. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're entirely comfortable with that.
Okay.
I mean, that is success in my mind. And you know, I'll give you an example. Right now, we do a lot of work with companies in the US to help them install solar on their roofs. That reduces their power consumption by anything up to 100% or even more. We earn less money on the energy side, but there are opportunities to build a relationship and make money on the other side of it. So, you have to look at the customer as a whole rather than worry about how many molecules did you consume on a particular day. Now, I appreciate not everyone of our competitors thinks that way, and some of them see energy efficiency as something to be feared. We would like to embrace it, and we think the market as a whole should embrace it.
To build on your video and to build on the question, and I rent my hot water tank from you, maybe I could rent the conservation measures as well. The British Gas video, or that video, showed them using less by using intelligent controls. So how does that go to British Gas or Centrica's bottom line?
Well, if you think about the video, it showed, and I'm not sure how many of these pieces were picked up, it showed solar, it showed an electric car charger, it showed various technologies around alarms, around appliances.
So that's the package that you sold?
British Gas is interested in doing the installation, the management, through either directly or through partnerships to allow that to happen. And bundling it all in a way that actually makes sense for the customer. So we are moving away from the idea that a retailer or a utility sends you a bill at the end of the month to tell you how much you used. We see that the fulfillment of that vision is really what energy companies should be about. It isn't about the number of molecules that you send down a line or down a pipe and that somebody counts for you and you send a bill for. It's much more significant than that. We think this is what customers are interested in.
In order to sell that house in the UK, you have to have a label, you have to have an energy guide, you have to be able to show how much energy it used. If we brought that benchmarking and labeling to North America, do you feel that would facilitate using our money more wisely and reducing carbon, but still making shareholders of Direct Energy wealthier?
Absolutely, and we are actively testing some of the technology that British Gas is using in North America, and we think there are opportunities. A lot of it is clearly facilitated by smart meters. We need to be able to check what's being used, not once in a while or every once a month or once a week, but on a short interval meter. So very smart meters will facilitate this, and we're encouraging this from a regulatory perspective. We're encouraging this vision for legislators and regulators to see that actually the rollout of smart meters can be one of the key things that facilitates this sort of vision.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody else at the microphone. But Nick, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind asking you a question myself, actually. And this is more in regards to the Ontario marketplace. And you talked about the competitive market and how it can really help. And in Ontario, we had a competitive market for about 6 months, I think, back in 2002, and then we closed it up again suddenly, just as it seemed like it was actually starting to be beneficial. And during that time, or over the next decade that we've experienced, we've had the different aspects of our bill change so much so that today, I know myself representing the Region Appeal, we have a component on our bill now called the Global Adjustment here. And it's going to cost me about $20 million this year, just on this one line item. How do you think really the Ontario marketplace could benefit more so from a different type of structure than what we have today?
I'm pleased I only have just over a minute to talk on this, because I think you could spend a lot longer. I mean, I spent 7 years of my career working here in Ontario and in Toronto, and it never ceased to amaze me how complicated the structure is, but how painful it is for almost all participants in the market. I think while the concept of the global adjustment, when it was originally envisaged, was a benefit, it was the provincial benefit where people got paid extra. The concept probably at the time was sensible. I think as the market has morphed and prices have changed, the fact that it is now essentially a penalty on consumers has made the market very difficult. I'd love to say I have a solution, and we've spent a lot of time thinking it over. We've spent a lot of time talking to politicians to see if there is a solution. I'm not sure there is an easy one. I think whichever way you go in Ontario right now, it's going to involve pain for somebody, and probably all parties, and it's going to be a long-term process. I would love to say that the global adjustment could disappear and we could go to a world magically overnight which showed proper price signals on the wholesale side, and particularly for consumers, so they can really think about the impact of what they use and how much it costs and what they can do to control that. Right now with the global adjustment there, I don't think those signals exist. To your extent, to your point there, Steve, you're spending $20 million this year on the global adjustment. It sort of doesn't matter how much you use. From an energy perspective, it's going to be around about that number. And so you don't receive the signals you need to make some efficiency changes that you could and probably should make in your business. You're doing it for other great reasons, but if you think about the industry as a whole, we don't have the benefits of competition, the benefits of price signals. There's very little differentiation between products, because as a retailer, when I sell something to you, your bill is made up of three chunks. One is the energy, one is the global adjustment, and one is the sort of distribution transmission charges. That global adjustment has got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So for me, in coming up with sort of revolutionary products around that smaller and smaller energy piece, it just doesn't, one, it doesn't make economic sense for me, and two, actually it's not that interesting for someone like you. So it's a tough market right now. I'd love to say I had the answer, but it's as I said, it's hard to see how we're going to solve it in the near term. I think it comes back to political will. If people really feel that we have to do something about it, it will happen. We thought the last election might be the trigger for that, and it wasn't. And you have to hope that at some point in the next few years, people are going to realize that it's essential that we do something about that. Otherwise, the industry is headed in a difficult direction, I think.